Hello, welcome to Horror Drift Stories. Before we begin, tell me where you're listening from tonight. If you enjoy quiet, creeping horror, make sure to subscribe. And just so you know, a few ads may play early, but after that, it's just you and the story. Now, get comfortable, slow down, and let's drift into the dark. Story 1. I am a 27-year-old man named Hunter, and I have spent a lot of time exploring abandoned places. I have always had one important rule, though. If a property belongs to someone and that person is still alive, I ask for permission before I go anywhere near it. I have never liked the idea of sneaking onto someone's land without asking. It just feels wrong to me. Exploring is supposed to be exciting, but it should still be respectful. This story happened in July of 2022, not long after I graduated from college in May. My friends and I had spent years exploring old buildings together, and we decided to go out one more time before real life got in the way. We were all about to start jobs and get busy with adult life, so this felt like our last free trip for a while. My friend Mary started searching online for abandoned buildings, and after going through a bunch of places that were too far away, she found one that looked close enough for us to try. We did not have an exact address. All we had was a photo someone had taken and posted online. The building was somewhere in the Chicago area, between Kankakee, the suburbs, and the city itself. From the picture, it looked like it sat out in a field near the road, surrounded by cornfields and open land. We drove out there that night and eventually found it. Though it was hard to spot in the dark, we parked beside the house and got our gear together. Back then, our ghost hunting supplies were mostly homemade because we were broke and fresh out of college. We used old equipment from before school or built little tools the night before. None of it was fancy, but we had enough to make ourselves feel prepared. We went in through the front door, which nearly fell off its hinges because the house was so old. It looked like it had been built in the 1950s or earlier. As soon as we stepped inside, it had the kind of feeling that told you an old family had lived there once. There was a low-quality TV, 2 rocking chairs instead of a couch, a few coats hanging around, and even some tiny jackets. None of that proved anything for sure, but it made us think older people had lived there. At first, the house was just quiet. Old houses always make some noise, and abandoned ones make even more, but this place felt different. The air inside was stale and still, and the rooms felt like they had not been touched in years. We moved around carefully, checking the place with our flashlights and camera equipment, making note of anything unusual. For a while, nothing really happened. Then around 11 p.m., everything changed. Our EMF reader started jumping up into the 3s and 4s. It was not constant, but it was enough to get our attention. We tried to find where the readings were coming from, and it felt like something was moving around us. Tyler, one of my friends, started looking up how spirits are supposed to behave. We were all trying to make sense of what we were feeling. The EMF seemed to spike in 4 main spots: the kitchen, the stairs, the upstairs bedroom, and the living room, especially near the left rocking chair. The longer we stayed, the stranger it got. We started seeing a dark silhouette moving through those parts of the house. Every time we pointed a light at it, it disappeared. That alone would have been bad enough. But then the refrigerator opened by itself. We all saw it. It was slow and unnatural, like something had tugged the door open from the inside. The longer we stayed, the more active whatever it was seemed to become. Tyler thought it might be a mimic, though I was so focused on the silhouette that I was not fully following his research. Still, from what we had read, a mimic is something that can copy and lure. It might toy with people. It might try to get attention. It cannot kill, but it can still hurt you if you provoke it or stay too long. Then the silhouette stopped behaving normally. It no longer followed the same pattern. It moved in strange, broken ways, almost like it knew we had noticed it. After that, we could not keep track of it properly. At some point, we could not see it at all anymore. That was when we decided to split up, but we stayed close enough to hear each other if anything happened. Mary went to the kitchen. I checked the hallway under the stairs. Tyler studied the living room. Jerry, our third friend, took the upstairs. It was not a good feeling splitting up in a place like that, but we thought it would help us cover more ground. The hallway under the stairs led me to a basement I had not noticed at first. Once I found the entrance and looked down, I realized there was another level beneath the house. I went down slowly with my phone flashlight out. That basement still sticks in my mind because of how wrong it felt the second I saw it. There were mannequins down there. Not one or two. Several. They were dressed in old women's clothes, the kind of outdated garments that looked like they had been stored for decades. Some mannequins were standing on bases. One even had legs attached to a circular platform. There were also 2 china cabinets filled with souvenirs and other random items. It looked like someone had once tried to make the space look organized or lived in. But instead, it just looked creepy. At one point, I noticed an unlocked safe sitting there, and it had money inside. I did not touch it. Something in me said it would be smarter to leave it alone and not anger whatever spirit might be nearby. The longer I stayed down there, the more uneasy I felt. And then I started hearing voices. The first one sounded like my mom. It was soft and familiar and completely out of place in that basement. Then I heard Mary calling me from upstairs. I knew something was wrong, but I still made the mistake of following the sounds. I thought maybe one of them needed help. I thought maybe someone had found something. When I got back toward the stairs and reached the top, Mary was still in the kitchen. I could see her, but I heard her voice right next to me. That broke me. I screamed and felt like footsteps were right behind me, chasing me out of the space. I ran for the door and forced it open, not even knowing what might be following me. Jerry was on the way down and tripped on the porch, hitting his head, but he got up fast. We all ran together and got outside. When we reached the yard, we stopped and just tried to breathe. We realized we had left our ghost tools inside, but none of us wanted to go back for them. We were done. At that point, it was not worth the risk. Whatever was in that house, we did not need to be holding cameras or EMF readers to know it was real. Mary started the van and we got in. Nobody said much at first. We just drove away through the night, trying to calm down. On the way back, we stopped at a Circle K for gas and snacks, mostly because it felt like the normal thing to do after something so wrong. Then, we kept driving until we got back to Bloomington. We did not talk much after that night. Not at first. It was the kind of experience that leaves everyone quiet, because saying it out loud makes it feel more real. But the truth is, none of us could explain what we saw. The silhouette, the refrigerator, the voices, the mannequins in the basement, the safe full of money, the feeling that something was copying Mary's voice and my mother's voice. It all felt wrong in a way I still do not know how to describe. What scared me most was how quickly the house seemed to react to us the longer we stayed. It was almost like it was aware of being watched. At first it was subtle, then the activity became more direct, and then it turned personal. That is what I can never shake. It did not feel like random haunting. It felt like something in that house knew how to get inside our heads. After that summer, we all quit. Officially, the attraction eventually shut down because of low visitor numbers and safety concerns. But even if it had stayed open, I would never have gone back. I would not have wanted to step inside that house again, for anything. I know people have a hard time believing stories like this. I understand that. If I had not been there, I probably would not believe it either. But I was there. Mary was there. Tyler was there. Jerry was there. We all saw pieces of it. We all felt the same fear. And whatever was in that house, it was not something I want to meet again. Even now, when I think about that night, I remember the silence first. The forest outside. The old house. The silhouette. The voices. The mannequins. And the feeling that we had walked into a place that had been waiting for us. If I had to give advice to anyone exploring places like that, I would say this. Trust the feeling in your gut when a place feels wrong. If it starts to feel like something is watching you, do not stay long enough to find out what it is. We left with all our lives, and that is enough for me. Story 2. I'm writing this because I need help, and I'm hungry. That sounds like a strange thing to say when I am clearly dealing with something much worse. But it is true. I am sitting here with an empty stomach, tired legs, and a mind that will not stop racing. I do not know if I am being stupid, panicking for no reason, or if something has happened that should not be possible. I just know I need someone to tell me what to do, because I am starting to run out of ideas, and the ideas I have left are getting worse. I go to the gym 2 or 3 times a week. I am not some fitness guy. I do not enjoy the gym. I do not wake up excited to lift weights, or count reps, or compare protein shakes. I would much rather be at home, playing games, watching TV, or just sitting on the couch with my wife when the kids are asleep and the house is finally quiet. But a few months after my son was born, I realized something had to change. I had 2 kids under 2 years old, and if I wanted to keep up with them, I could not keep living like I did before I became a dad. I needed more energy, more strength, more patience, and probably better sleep too, though with little kids, that part was never really in my control. So I started going to the gym, not because I liked it, but because I had to. My son goes to sleep after dinner most nights. My wife usually puts our daughter down about an hour later. Once she does, I leave for the gym, so I am not getting home too late. That setup works well for us. If I am the one who puts our daughter to bed, she can keep me there until 8:30 at night, and then I would not get home from the gym until 10. By then, I would be useless. My wife is kind enough to let me go when I do, and I am grateful for that more than I say out loud. I also told her that when I got back from the gym, I would use the spare bathroom for my shower. The bathroom in our room does not have a door, which means if I shower in there, the light and noise wake her up or keep her up. She normally goes to bed around 9:30, and I wanted her to be able to sleep properly without me bothering her. So I started using the other bathroom instead. It is really the kids' bathroom, but everyone in the house uses it. They bathe there, brush their teeth there, wash their hands there, all the usual things. We never really close the door because our daughter is obsessed with being Little Miss Independent. And if she wants to go in and out, we usually just let her. The bathroom is across from the kids' rooms, and we keep their bedroom doors open at night so they feel comfortable. That is just how things are in our house. It is busy, a little messy, and always full of small noises. The house never feels truly empty, even when everybody is asleep. Tonight was supposed to be like any other night. I left for the gym, after putting in my usual effort to be a decent father before sneaking out for some personal time. The kids had already eaten. My son was being fussy, probably because his teeth are coming in, and that has been making him miserable. My daughter was in one of those moods where everything is either hilarious or a disaster. My wife handled the bedtime routine while I got ready to leave. At the gym, I did my usual thing. I am terrible at following proper routines. I do not have some clever program or spreadsheet full of exercises. I just move from machine to machine and use whatever looks useful. There are about 10 machines I mess around with, and I use all of them because in my head that means I am getting a full workout. It is not pretty, but it works enough for me. Tonight, I was more tired than usual. My body felt heavy halfway through the workout, and I kept telling myself that it was probably because I had not slept well. That was the likely answer. Teething baby, broken sleep, long day, no mystery. By the time I got home, the house seemed normal. The kids were asleep. My wife was asleep. A few lights were on in the house for me, just like always, enough to guide me through the hallway without turning the whole place into a hospital ward. It felt like a regular quiet night. I went to the main bathroom and grabbed my pajamas and shower stuff. Then I headed to the guest bathroom, which we use as the kids' bathroom. I remember thinking that I should probably clean the mirror at some point, but that was just normal tired brain stuff. Nothing felt off. I closed the bathroom door behind me and started the shower. We have never really used that shower before. It is there. It works. And that is about as far as my relationship with it has gone. I was not expecting anything strange, and for the first few minutes, there was nothing strange at all. Just warm water, steam on the mirror, the usual sound of water hitting tile, and the kind of tired relief you feel after a workout. Then, halfway through the shower, I heard the ventilation system make a different noise. It was subtle at first, just a lower hum than normal. I noticed it because the house was so quiet. When you are alone in a bathroom with the water running, little sounds become louder. I looked up at the vent for a second, thinking maybe something had shifted inside it or the fan had changed speed or whatever. But it seemed like nothing serious. Just one of those house noises you hear and then forget. So, I forgot about it. I finished my shower, dried myself off, and put on my pajamas. I checked my phone and saw it was around 9:30, maybe a few minutes after. I still had plenty of time to sit down, watch something, play a game, or just stare at the wall for a while before bed. It felt like the end of a normal evening. Then I opened the bathroom door. There was nothing there. I do not mean the hallway was just dark. I mean there was nothing. At first, my brain did not understand what my eyes were showing me. The space outside the bathroom should have been lit. There are night lights around the house, and even if every one of them had failed, I should have still seen the hallway, the floor, the wall opposite the bathroom. Something. Instead, there was just blackness. Not regular dark. Not nighttime dark. This was black in a way I had never seen before. It looked like a hole in the world, like the house had been cut open and there was no space beyond the door at all. I had to think of Vantablack after the fact, because that was the closest thing I could compare it to. But even that does not really explain it. It was not just dark. It was the absence of a place. I bent down slowly and reached toward the floor. There was no floor. My hand moved into empty space. I pulled back so fast that I nearly stumbled. My heart started racing hard and fast, and the first thing I grabbed was my towel. I did not even think. I just threw it out through the doorway because I needed to know what would happen. The towel fell. It was still damp, so it did not float or drift. It dropped straight down, and then it kept dropping. I stared until I could not see it anymore. I waited to hear it hit something. I never heard it land. I slammed the door shut. I stood there breathing too fast, trying to understand what I had seen. My brain immediately started trying to protect me from the obvious conclusion. Maybe I was dreaming. Maybe I had fainted. Maybe I was exhausted and hallucinating. Maybe the shower steam had messed with my vision. Maybe. So, I tested myself. I looked at the time. It was 9:46. I looked at my hands. They were there. I pinched myself. It hurt. I told myself that I must have opened the door wrong, or that my eyes had tricked me. Maybe I had closed it, and the angle made the hallway look strange. I do not know. I was desperate for anything normal. I opened the door again. The same void was waiting for me. No floor, no hall, no wall, no light. Just that impossible black nothing beyond the door. That was when the panic really hit. Where was I? Where were my kids? Where was my wife? Was the house still there? Was I still in the house? Had something happened to me? Had I somehow stepped into a nightmare without realizing it? I am the kind of person who always thinks he would make the smart choice in a scary situation. I am the one who watches horror movies and mutters at the screen when the characters split up or walk toward the noise. I always think, I would never do that. I thought I would stay calm and think clearly. I was wrong. I had nothing. I tried stupid little things because my brain could not accept what was happening. I turned the shower back on. I turned the bath tap on. I looked for anything that might make the room feel normal again. I even stood there staring into the blackness, hoping my eyes would adjust and show me the hall. Nothing changed. The minutes kept moving. By 10:30, I was still stuck in the bathroom, and nothing I tried had worked. That was when I heard the sound from above. At first, it was barely there. The same sound I had noticed in the middle of the shower. It was coming from the ventilation above me. The hum. But now that the water was off, I could hear it more clearly. It did not sound like a fan anymore. It sounded like something else. Something low and heavy. Something guttural. Something that made my skin crawl because it felt almost, but not quite, like a voice. It started quietly, and then it got louder, and louder, and louder. I sat down in the bathtub because standing was making me feel worse. My legs were shaking. My hands were cold. I pulled out my phone because I needed to do something, anything, and this seemed better than screaming into the void outside the door. So now I am sitting in the bathtub, writing this, hoping somebody reads it before the battery dies. I keep looking at the bathroom door. I do not know if the blackness on the other side is still there. I do not want to open it again. I do not want to find out if it leads to the hallway, the rest of the house, or something much worse. Every time I think about opening it, my chest locks up. The sound in the vent is still there. It keeps changing. Sometimes it sounds like a deep mechanical hum. Sometimes it sounds like breathing. Sometimes it sounds like a low voice trying to force words through metal. I cannot tell if it is getting closer or if I am just getting more terrified of it. Maybe both. I keep thinking about my son, asleep in his bed. I keep thinking about my daughter in her room. I keep thinking about my wife, only a few rooms away, probably asleep and unaware that I am trapped in a bathroom with a doorway full of nothing. That is the worst part. The house should feel safe. It is our home. It is where the kids sleep. It is where we eat dinner, where I help with bath time, where my wife and I talk about nothing important after the children are down, where all the small, ordinary parts of our life happen. It is supposed to be the one place in the world where I can let my guard down. Now I do not know what this place is anymore. I have checked the time a few times since this started, and it keeps moving normally. That somehow makes it worse. If time was broken too, at least I would have another impossible thing to blame. But time is fine. It is everything else that is wrong. I keep hoping I will wake up. I keep hoping I will hear my wife call my name from the bedroom, or hear one of the kids crying, or hear the normal sounds of the house settling. Instead, all I hear is that noise above me, and the silence from outside the door, and my own breathing getting faster every time I think too hard. I am trying to stay calm. I really am. I am trying to think like a father, like a husband, like an adult who has to protect his family. But I do not know what action makes sense when a bathroom door opens into a place that does not exist. If anyone has ever experienced anything like this, please tell me what to do. Do I open the door? Do I stay here? Do I wake my wife? Do I call the police and explain that there is no floor outside my bathroom? I know how insane that sounds. I know. But I am telling the truth. I am sitting in the bathtub, fully dressed in pajamas, wet hair still on my neck, phone in my hand, with a black impossible nothing outside the door, and something in the vent above me making a sound I do not want to hear anymore. I am scared, and I do not know what I am scared of exactly, which is making it worse. The hum above me just changed again. It stopped sounding like a machine. Now it sounds lower, closer, almost like it knows I am listening. Please help me. Story 3. This happened 9 years ago, when I was in college and still young enough to think I understood what was safe and what was not. It was the middle of summer break, one of those long, lazy stretches where the days blur together and you feel like nothing important is happening. I had just downloaded Tinder because my friends kept making fun of me for not trying it. They said I was wasting my time, waiting around for the perfect girl to just appear in real life. I argued that dating apps were fake, full of catfishes, scammers, and people pretending to be someone else. That was my excuse anyway. The truth was, I was nervous. I was not confident about how I looked. I was not ugly exactly, but I was average in that way that makes you feel invisible. I was the kind of guy people passed by without noticing. So when I finally made the profile, I was not expecting much. I put up a few pictures that looked decent enough, wrote something basic, and then spent the next couple of days checking it way too often even though I got almost no matches. Honestly, that was what I expected. Then, one night, right before I was about to put my phone down and go to sleep, I got a match. Her name was Amy. She looked incredible. Way too good for me if I am being honest. She had that kind of face that makes you assume the picture is fake at first. I stared at her profile for a while, trying to figure out if it was real. I figured there was a good chance it was a catfish. Why would someone that attractive be interested in a guy like me? But at the same time, I did not want to mess it up if she was real. So I sent a message anyway. To my surprise, she responded quickly. We started talking, and the conversation felt easy. Not forced, not awkward. It was one of those back and forth exchanges that makes you think, maybe this is actually going somewhere. She was funny, smart, and she knew how to keep a conversation moving without making it feel like work. I tried not to get too excited, but I was already starting to hope. We kept texting almost every day after that. Sometimes we would do video calls too, which helped ease my suspicion a little. Seeing her face on camera made her feel more real. Still, I kept a little doubt in the back of my mind. We lived about 10 hours apart, which was a lot but not impossible. Over time, she started suggesting we meet in person. I had summer break, and I was not supposed to go back to college for another month, so I figured I had nothing better to do. I said yes. The drive there was calm. I remember listening to music, keeping one hand on the wheel, and trying to convince myself I was not making a mistake. I still had that little voice in my head telling me maybe this was not really Amy. Maybe I was walking into something stupid. But I kept going, because the longer I talked to her, the more I wanted to believe she was real. When I finally got close, I texted her and told her I was there. She told me to knock on the front door. Even after all the video calls, I still had this weird feeling in my stomach. Part of me was still waiting for the whole thing to collapse into a joke. Like I would knock, and some random guy would answer, or nobody would answer at all. I remember standing there for a second, looking at the house, and just feeling off. It was a normal house, on the outside, but the feeling around it was not normal. I knocked. The door opened, and there she was, Amy. She was even prettier in person, which made my brain freeze for a second, because now I really had no idea what was going on. She smiled warmly and hugged me like we had known each other for years. I remember feeling a little embarrassed because I had been so ready to believe the worst, and now she was standing there acting completely normal. I stepped inside, and that was when I noticed the smell. It was awful. Not just a bad smell, not just stale air or dirty dishes. It was something heavy and rotten, like something had died in the house and been left there too long. The closest thing I can compare it to is the smell of a body decomposing, though I did not want to believe that at the time. It was strong enough that it hit me the second I walked in, and it made my stomach tighten. I asked Amy about it. She told me she did not smell anything. She said maybe I was imagining it, or maybe it was something from outside. I tried to tell myself, maybe she was right. Maybe the house had old plumbing or something weird in the walls. I did not want to freak out over nothing. At that point, I was just glad she was real. I had gone all that way expecting to get catfished, and instead, I was in her house talking to an actual person. We went into the living room and sat down on the couch. For a while, things felt surprisingly normal. We talked like two people who had been building up to this moment for weeks. The chemistry we had online was there in person too, maybe even stronger. She was easy to talk to. She laughed at my jokes. I laughed at hers. It felt like one of those rare moments where you think, maybe this really could work. But the smell kept bothering me. The longer I sat there, the more aware I became of the house around us. It was quiet in a way that did not feel peaceful. It felt like the kind of quiet that comes before something happens. I kept glancing toward the hallway without meaning to. The smell was stronger near the back of the house, and I was starting to wonder if maybe something was wrong in one of the rooms. Then I heard movement. It came from somewhere down the hallway. A little rustle, a shift, maybe a step. I do not know exactly what it was, but it was enough to make me stop talking. Then I heard a voice. Shit. It was a whisper, but it carried clearly enough for me to hear it from down the hallway. My whole body went still. That was the moment my gut started screaming at me. Something was wrong. I could not explain how I knew, but I knew. The whole feeling in the room changed. It was like a switch flipped in my head, and suddenly every little detail made sense in a bad way. The smell, the quiet, the strange tension in the house. I felt like I was sitting in a trap without realizing it until the door had already started closing. I stood up. I did not say anything dramatic. I just got to my feet because I needed to get out of there, and I needed to do it calmly if possible. Amy grabbed my arm before I could leave the room. "Where are you going?" she asked. I tried not to panic. I tried to act normal. "Just heading to the bathroom," I said. Her whole face changed. It was not a little reaction. It was immediate and cold. Her expression hardened, and her voice changed too. "No," she said. "You're staying here with me." She knew I had figured something out. Or at least, enough of it. She knew I had heard the sound down the hallway, and was probably about to leave. She was trying to stop me from going anywhere else. I heard a door slowly creak open somewhere nearby. That sound is burned into my memory. I did not wait to see what was behind it. I did not ask questions. I did not try to act polite or brave. I just moved. I ripped my arm free and ran out of the living room. I remember hearing footsteps almost instantly. 4 men came out of the bedroom. All of them had knives. I do not think I got a clear look at their faces. My brain was too busy trying to get me out of that house. Everything blurred together after that. I remember the shape of them, the movement, the way they came after me all at once. That is about it. My body went into full panic mode. I did not stop to think. I just ran. I sprinted for the front door as fast as I could, but in the middle of my panic, I tripped over a power cord and crashed to the floor. I hit hard enough that the air left my lungs for a second. I looked back and saw them closing in. That sight is hard to explain. I remember fear so intense it felt physical. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was going to burst through my chest. I scrambled up, half falling, half running, and kept moving toward the door. One of them got close enough that I honestly thought I was done for. I made it outside by pure luck and adrenaline. I was running so hard I could barely feel my legs. I reached my car, yanked the door open, and jumped inside. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost missed the lock. But I got it shut, just in time. Then I turned the engine on, slammed the gas, and tore out of there as fast as I could. I looked in the rearview mirror once I was moving. The 4 men were standing there in front of the house, just standing, watching me leave. That image still creeps me out more than anything else. Not the knives, not the chase, not even Amy. It was the way they just stood there and watched me drive off, like they knew I had gotten away and were not even surprised. I did not stop driving until I reached my friend's place. When I got there, I was still shaking. I told him what had happened, or tried to. He did not believe me at first. He thought I was joking, or overreacting, or sleep-deprived. He kept saying I sounded crazy. I could not really blame him, because even saying it out loud made it sound insane. I asked if I could stay the night. He let me crash on his couch in the living room. I still was not calm by the time I laid down. My whole body felt wired and sick. I kept replaying everything in my head, trying to figure out what part of it had gone wrong first. The smell, the whisper, Amy grabbing my arm, the door opening. I could not make sense of it all. Then I got a text from Amy. It said, "Where did you go?" I remember staring at that message in the dark for a long time. Then I blocked her number without replying. I went to sleep after that, though I barely slept at all. I kept waking up and checking my phone like an idiot, half expecting another message. I never heard from her again after that night. I never tried to contact her. I did not want to know who she really was, and I did not want any part of that house or those men ever again. Even now, years later, I still remember the feeling of being in that house, the smell, the tone in her voice when she told me not to leave, the way the whole thing changed the second I stood up to go. Sometimes I wonder, What would have happened if I had ignored my gut and stayed in the living room a little longer? I do not know what they planned to do to me. I do not know if the knives were just for show, or if they had something much worse in mind. All I know is that I got out. And I think about that a lot, because it feels like one of those moments where life split into two versions. One where I listened to the feeling in my stomach and survived, and one where I stayed a little longer and never came back. I do not know who Amy really was. I do not know what was going on in that house. I only know that I was lucky enough to trust myself at the right time. Story 4. Since I was 7 years old, I have had this friend. Most people would call her imaginary. Some people would say she was a game I played with myself, or a habit I never grew out of, or the kind of thing lonely kids make up when they spend too much time alone. But she has been there for 28 years now, and that is too long for me to call her a passing thought. Too long for me to act like she is nothing. She has been a constant in my life, in a way almost nothing else has. She looks at me from around corners. She lingers above the shower curtain. For a long time, she only showed me the top half of her face, just enough for me to know she was there, just enough to make me uneasy. When I get out of the shower, there she is at the doorway, always peering at me with that blank, curious expression. She does not blink much. Or maybe she does, and I just never notice it because I am too busy trying not to look at her for too long. Every time I run to see the rest of her, she disappears to another spot farther away, just out of reach. I never understood how she does it. I still do not. One second she is in the corner of my eye, and the next she is somewhere else, behind the hall wall, near the stairs, at the end of the yard, just far enough away to make me doubt what I saw. It is always the same feeling, a little pull in my stomach, a pressure in the air, the sense that something is watching me with patient interest. One time I ran far out into a field, where the nearest tree was so far away I could barely see it. The grass was high, the sky was open, and there was nowhere for anything to hide. I thought I had finally done it. I thought I had put enough distance between us that she could not possibly keep following me. But somehow I knew she was there, hiding behind that tree, watching. So I sat in that field for 2 straight days. I did not move much. I did not eat much. I just sat and waited because I wanted to know if I was right. I wanted to know if I was losing my mind or if something real was out there, standing still behind that tree with its face turned toward me. Most people would shudder at the thought of her. Most people would feel sick just hearing what I am saying now. But I have known her for so long that fear is not the only thing I feel anymore. There is fear, yes. There is dread. There is that deep, uneasy feeling in my chest every time I realize she is near. But there is also familiarity. That is the part I hate most. When I first told my parents about her, they told me to start acting my age. They thought I was making her up. Maybe they thought it was a phase. Maybe they thought I wanted attention. I do not know. They were not cruel about it exactly, but they were tired in the way adults get when they do not want to deal with something they cannot understand. So I stopped talking about her. I learned quickly that saying her name out loud made people uncomfortable. I learned that if I brought her up, they would look at me like I was broken. So I kept it inside. I kept watching, and I kept waiting, and I kept learning what I could. On my 10th birthday, I decided to stop trying to interact with her. I had spent years chasing her, calling out to her, turning around too fast, trying to catch the rest of her face before she moved again. Nothing ever worked. So I tried the opposite. I tried to ignore her. At first, I thought it was stupid. She was always there, and pretending she was not there felt impossible. But after a while, I noticed something strange. When I paid attention to her, she stopped moving. She froze. She would stay where I could see her, always just barely visible, always frustratingly incomplete. But when I ignored her, when I tried to act like she was not there, I would notice more of her. A little more. Just a centimeter more. Maybe less. It was always small at first, a tiny new line of her jaw, a little more of her cheek, a hint of the lower part of her face. If I stared too hard, it stopped. If I looked away and acted normal, she gave up more of herself to me. That was the rule I discovered. Attention kept her in place. Ignoring her let her grow. Of course, at the time, I did not understand why I would ever want to do that. Why would I want to see more of her if seeing more of her made me feel worse? But humans are strange, and curiosity is stronger than good sense. I kept testing it. I kept noticing patterns. I kept making little private calculations in my head. If I look at her for this long, then ignore her for this long, how much more will I see? If I stop reacting, how fast does she change? If I pretend I do not care, will she become clearer? That kind of thing. The trouble was that the pattern never stayed stable for long. Some years, she barely changed at all. Other years, I would see something new after only a few months. There was no clean formula, no neat answer. The only thing I knew for sure was that she responded to me somehow, as if my attention was feeding the shape of her. In 2003, she grew a whole 2 centimeters. That was the year I started to see the bottom half of her face. That was also the year I could tell she was smiling. I remember the first time I saw it. I had ignored her for months, maybe longer. I had done my best not to look directly at her, not to react when I felt her nearby, not to let her know I was paying attention. Then one day I caught the lower curve of her mouth, and it was there. A smile, small at first, almost like the beginning of one, but definitely a smile. I wanted to be relieved. I wanted to think that maybe this meant something good. Instead, I felt cold all over, because it was not a kind smile. It was not warm or playful or human in any way that comforted me. It looked like she was pleased with me for looking. After that, I stopped pretending this was harmless. Part of me wanted to ignore her even more, just to see what would happen when I finally saw all of her. Another part of me was terrified of that, of what her full face might mean, of what it might do to my mind when there was nothing left hidden. Of course she makes me nervous. That has been the story of my life for as long as I can remember. I cannot commit to serious relationships. I cannot stay close to people for long. I work from home because it is easier that way. No one wants to be friends with a guy who is always looking over his shoulder, always stiff, always distracted, always half listening to something no one else can see. The years I pay attention to her are the worst. I lose time. I lose sleep. I lose whole stretches of my life to trying not to think about her. Even when I try to be normal, she takes up space in my head. I can be in a room full of people and still feel her somewhere nearby, waiting for me to glance in the wrong direction. I have tried to make the best of it. For 6 months, I tried to get her to play chess with me. I do not know why I thought that would help. Maybe I wanted structure. Maybe I wanted to turn this into something with rules and turns, and a board and a beginning and an end. If she was going to stay in my life, I wanted some way to understand her. So I set up the board and pretended, in the dumbest way possible, that this could become a joke between us. It did not feel like my joke. The laughs I let out did not feel like my own. That is hard to explain to anyone who has never had something this long in their life. I would sit there, moving pieces around, half expecting her to react, and when I laughed it was like the sound came from somewhere a little to the side of me. Not fully mine, not fully natural. It drove me crazier than I already was. I stopped after 6 months, because I could feel myself starting to slip. Now, I spend a lot of time waiting for my brain to explode from the stress. That sounds dramatic, but I do not mean it in a poetic way. I mean, I actually expect, sometimes, that one day my head will simply give out. I will be standing in the kitchen, or brushing my teeth, or opening a computer file. And that will be it. Too much pressure, too many years, too many nights of seeing her in the same places, and my mind will just crack. Sometimes I think she has a power over me that keeps me healthy, alive, and tied to her. I think I would be dead already if that were not the case. That is a horrible thought to have about a thing that may not even be real. But I have had it for years. When I am sick, she is still there. When I am exhausted, she is still there. When I am shaking with stress or running on no sleep, she is still there. It almost feels like she will not let me go until some larger thing has finished happening. I have this awful feeling that I will not be able to tell you what happens when she gets out. Because I think, deep down, that there is an out. I think there is a point where she will stop being where she is now. I do not know if she is trapped behind something, or inside something, or if I am the thing holding her back. I only know that I am the gatekeeper. That is my only real job. My online counseling gig does not count. It sounds ridiculous, I know. Imagine someone like me giving life advice to strangers. Imagine me sitting there in front of a screen, typing calm little messages to people who think their problems are big, while I have spent most of my life sharing a house, a hallway, or a bed with something I do not understand. But I do it anyway. I answer the messages. I keep up the notes. I tell people to breathe, to journal, to talk to someone they trust, to give themselves time. Most of it is useful advice. I do know things. I know how to help someone through panic. I know how to write a kind reply. I know how to sound steady. That does not make me steady. Sometimes, when I am gaming, I forget about her for a moment. That is the closest thing I have to peace. I will be in the middle of a COD match, focused on the map, on the noise, on the stupid quick rush of the game, and for a few minutes, she is gone from my mind. I do not think about corners. I do not think about doorways. I do not think about the shower curtain or the end of the hall or the place behind me. I just play. It is the only time I really relax. And then I feel guilty for relaxing, because the idea of her getting out ruins the mood immediately. It ruins everything. It sits in the back of my head like a hand on my neck. I can be in the middle of a match, almost winning, and suddenly remember that if I lose focus, if I let my mind drift, if I go too long without checking, she might change again. She ruins everything. Sleeping is the worst part. She is almost always at the end of my bed. Sometimes she changes it up and peeks at me from the side of the bed instead. I never know which I am going to get. The end of the bed is bad enough. The side of the bed is worse, because it feels closer, too close. The first time it happened, I almost punched the mattress without meaning to, because the instinct to defend myself was so strong. But I cannot move properly when she is near. That is the part that scares me most. When she gets close, I freeze. My body feels like a ton of bricks. I can barely lift my arms. It is as if my muscles forget what they are for. If I look at her too closely, I lock up completely. I do not know if that is fear or some other kind of effect, but it happens every time. I have gotten very good at feeling where she is. I do not need to turn around to know. It is strange, the way the body learns danger. I have lived with this long enough that I can sense her the way some people sense weather. A pressure in the room, a cold spot, a shift in the air. I know when she is near my bed, when she is in the doorway, when she is at the bathroom sink, when she is in the hallway outside my office. I have not looked directly at her in 6 months, but I can still feel where she is. She is not clinging to the corners anymore. She is right behind me. Story 5. I taught my daughter the same rule my mother taught me. It was the rule my great-grandmother had passed to my grandmother, and my grandmother had passed to my mother, and my mother passed to me. It was the one simple lesson that seemed to hold our whole town together. If they approach you, and they are beautiful, do not trust them. If they approach you, and they are hideous, thank them and walk away. If their eyes follow you, run and do not look back. Those were the first words my mother ever dared to say clearly to me. She said them after I was born, while I was still covered in blood and mucus and bits of membrane. And even then they mattered more than anything else. I was only a baby, but she held me close and whispered those words into my ear before the cord was cut between us. It was almost funny, in a strange way, that the first thing I ever truly learned was how to survive. And now I say those same words to my daughter every day. She is still too young to go out alone, but I tell them to her anyway. I say them softly, while I comb her hair, or dress her, or hold her on my hip while she points at the window and asks for things she cannot yet have. Her eyes go wide when I say the words, and she looks at me like she is trying to understand. She does not understand yet, but she will. I did not understand either, not until it happened to me. My first time alone outside the house was when I was 15. That was my first real chore, my first time being sent out without a parent beside me. I had spent half my life indoors, always watched, always accompanied, always reminded of the rule. My father gave me a few crumpled bills and told me to go to the small market in the middle of town. He wanted a bottle of milk. He also gave me a little extra money and told me to get myself something sweet from Tom's shop. That should have made me suspicious. The market was not far. I could have jogged there in less than 10 minutes, but I was young and excited and stupid, and all I could think about was being alone outside for the first time. I wanted to see the streets on my own. I wanted to choose my own candy. I wanted to feel like a normal girl for once. My mother held the front door open for me with the kind of face people wear at funerals, and she repeated the rule one more time. If they approach you and they are beautiful, do not trust them. If they approach you and they are hideous, thank them and be on your way. If their eyes follow, run and do not look back. Yes, Father, I said automatically, because that was how we answered at home. Father, Mother, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. We were a careful family in a careful town. Then I stepped outside. The sun was bright that day, so bright, in fact, that it blurs a lot of the memory for me now. I remember walking down the street with my little shopping list and my money folded in my hand. I remember feeling proud of myself. I remember thinking that everyone I passed was looking at me because they could see I was out on my own. And I thought that made me feel important. In truth, maybe they were not judging me at all. Maybe they were worried. At the time, though, I was too busy being excited to notice. That was when I ran into her. I can still describe her clearly, even after all these years. She looked almost angelic. Her skin was so pale it was nearly white, and under the sunlight, I could see thin blue veins running up her neck and along her face. Her eyes were long and narrow like a cat's, and her lips were painted a deep red, the kind of color my mother only wore on special days, like weddings or funerals. There was something deeply beautiful about her, too beautiful maybe. Her face was smooth and flawless, in a way real skin never is. At the time, I thought she was like a painting or a statue brought to life, but there were details that made me uneasy even before I understood why. Her clothes were strange. She wore white cloth that flowed around her body, and silver ornaments hung from her arms and neck. Some of them looked like crosses or ankhs, except they hung upside down, as if they had been turned the wrong way on purpose. Her hair was gold, bright and soft in the sunlight, falling around her shoulders like a halo. Her long nails brushed my arm when I stumbled into her. I remember blushing. I remember feeling embarrassed because she was so lovely, and I had nearly crashed into her like a fool. "I'm sorry," I said. I wasn't looking where I was going. She smiled at me then, slow and perfect, showing a neat line of teeth. Her expression was warm, almost gentle. She tilted her head the way a cat might. "That's all right," she said. "I've got you." I should have run right then. But I did not. For one strange second, I could not look away from her face. Then my eyes dropped, and that was when I saw the mark on her forehead. At first, I thought it was a tattoo. It was an upside-down triangle inside a larger circle, small but noticeable. But the longer I looked, the worse it became. It was not ink. It was skin. The skin on her forehead had been cut so many times that it had not healed correctly. It had opened and hardened and folded in on itself until the symbol seemed to grow out of her flesh. The blood around it had long since dried dark, almost black. It looked like the wound had learned not to scar and had instead stayed open forever, turned into a symbol carved into her very body. That was what broke the spell. Her smile did not look kind anymore. It looked pleased. It looked hungry. It looked like the smile someone gives themselves when they know dinner is almost ready. And then I remembered the rule. If they approach you and they are beautiful, do not trust them. If they approach you and they are hideous, thank them and be on your way. If their eyes follow, run and do not look back. Her eyes were on me then, not just on my face, but on my hands, my feet, my neck, my chest. They moved over me in quick little jerks, as if she were studying every part of me at once. So I ran. I do not think I have ever run so fast in my life. Her laughter followed me down the street, and it was the most horrible sound I had ever heard. It did not match the sweet voice she had used a moment before. It was rough and wet and cracked, like something broken trying to imitate joy. She did not chase me, which somehow made it worse. She only laughed, as if she knew I belonged to her already. I did not look back. I did not stop until I reached the general store, where I had to lean over with my hands on my knees and breathe like I had been underwater. The shopkeeper, Mr. Mercer, looked at me with raised eyebrows and asked if I was all right. "Yes, sir," I said. Though I was not, he glanced at my milk and my bag, and then said something about my father. He said my father owed him some labor and had promised to help move apple crates out back because his knees were bad. He said it in a way that made it sound like he expected me to bring my father with me, or at least pass the message along. "Just me today, Mr. Mercer," I said, trying to sound normal. He looked at me for a second too long, and then nodded as if he understood something he did not want to say out loud. "I see," he said quietly. I thanked him, paid for the milk, and started toward Tom's sweet emporium. But then, Mr. Mercer called after me, telling me I should skip Tom's and go straight home because it was getting late and I did not want to be out after dark. His tone was casual, but the meaning behind it was not. You do not want to be out alone after dark. That was what he really meant. I understood it at once. When I looked back, it was already getting dimmer. The shadows were longer. The street felt emptier. My candy suddenly seemed less important than getting home before anything else could find me. So I kept walking. That was when I saw the second thing. It was near the bus stop, the same place where I had bumped into the beautiful woman earlier. But this time I did not come upon it suddenly. I saw it from a distance, slowly taking shape as I walked closer. It was a mass of flesh. That is the only way I can really describe it. A moving pile of human flesh, with eyes and mouths and a nose spread across it in the wrong places. It looked like several people had been forced together and pinned inside a body that could not hold them properly. Faces were half-formed in the surface of it, pushing from the inside as if they were trying to break free. I could see sharp noses, hollow cheeks, and deep-set eyes, but none of it formed one person. It was more like many people trapped in one ugly shape. My stomach turned. I thought of the beautiful woman again, and understood at once that the two things were connected. Somehow, the lovely face and this horrible thing belonged to the same place, the same rule, the same world I had just stepped into. Then the creature moved. I made a sound I am not proud of. I think I almost threw up. I know, I wet myself. There is no elegant way to say it. I was a scared teenage girl, and my body betrayed me. The thing lurched toward me, dragging strings of blood, hair, and torn skin behind it. Faces in its flesh twisted as it moved. Then it spoke. Angel of light, it said. The words came from more than one mouth at once. Some voices were high, some were low. Some sounded like men, some like women, and some sounded neither. It was like a choir being strangled mid-song. Angel of light, it repeated. I heard the rule again in my head. If they approach you, and they are beautiful, do not trust them. If they approach you, and they are hideous, thank them and be on your way. If their eyes follow, run, and do not look back. So I did the only thing I could think of. I said, thank you. The creature paused. Then I said it again, louder this time. Thank you. I was not even sure what I was thanking it for not killing me, for warning me, for letting me go. I do not know. I only knew the rule said to thank them if they were hideous. So I did. The thing did not seem angry. It did not seem pleased either. It only kept groaning the same phrase over and over again, as if it were trying to remember it. Finally, I turned and ran home as fast as my legs could carry me. When I reached our front door, my parents were already waiting on the sofa. They did not ask many questions. My mother looked at me with the same tired face she had used when I left, and she said, almost to herself, "Oh dear, let's get you a bath." That was all. No lecture, no yelling, no demand for an explanation. My father did not even lift his eyes from the television screen, which was turned off and reflecting the room back at us in a dark gray blur. That was when I realized that they already knew. They had known I would come home frightened. They had known I would see something. Maybe they had known exactly what it would be. And now I know too. Years have passed since then. I grew up, married, and had a daughter of my own. My little Rosemary will turn 15 one day, and when she does, I know what I will tell her. I will give her the same crumpled little bill my father once gave me, and I will send her to the market just like he sent me. I will tell her to be brave. I will tell her to walk quickly and stay alert and keep her eyes open. I will tell her not to be tempted by sweets if temptation means danger. I will tell her to be polite if she meets something hideous, and to run if its eyes follow. I will tell her the rule, again and again, until she can recite it in her sleep. If they approach you, and they are beautiful, do not trust them. If they approach you and they are hideous, thank them and be on your way. If their eyes follow, run and do not look back, because I know now that the world is full of things that wear beauty like a mask, and things that wear horror like a warning. I know that some dangers smile at you. I know that some of them beg to be thanked. I know that if a thing watches you too closely, you must not wait to find out why. I learned that on a sunny day when I was 15 years old, walking to the market with a bottle of milk and a few coins in my pocket. And I have never forgotten it. Story 6. There's a reason the humidity in Florida feels like it's trying to smother you. People say it's just the weather. Heat. Salt in the air. Storms that never fully leave. But that's not the whole truth. It's the way the air clings to your skin like it has hands. The way your clothes never feel completely dry. The way you can step outside for 30 seconds and come back in feeling like something followed you. Like the outside came in with you and refused to let go. My name is Alex. I moved into a small ground floor apartment in Tampa because I wanted quiet. I wanted a fresh start. I wanted a place that didn't feel crowded, didn't feel noisy, didn't feel like I had to share it with the world. And for a little while, it worked. The apartment complex was old, covered in ivy that made it look softer than it really was. During the day, it almost felt charming. At night, the oak trees out front threw heavy shadows across the windows, and the shadows seemed to stretch longer than they should, like they were reaching for the glass. I used to think the quiet there was peaceful. Now I know. It was the kind of quiet that listens back. Because I wasn't alone. And the worst part wasn't something obvious, like a face in the mirror or footsteps running down the hall. The worst part was the tiny changes, small, careful changes that made my brain argue with itself. Little moments where the most basic logic in my head started to slip, like someone tightening a rope around it. One slow pull at a time. This isn't a ghost story. Ghosts are easy to dismiss. People can laugh at you, tell you it was the pipes, the wind, an old building settling. A ghost is almost convenient because you can put it in a box labeled "not real" and shove it away. What happened to me was real. It was happening while I was still living there. It happened in the same rooms where I brushed my teeth and made coffee and tried to fall asleep. And if you're reading this in a quiet room, I mean it when I say you might want to check behind you before you keep going. It started small. So small I didn't even call it started at first. My keys weren't where I usually left them. A window I remembered closing was cracked open by an inch. A kitchen cabinet door was slightly off, like it hadn't been shut all the way. When you first move into a new place, your brain makes excuses automatically. It tells you you're distracted, you're tired, you're still building habits. You don't know the normal of the apartment yet. You misplace things. You forget details. I'm a graphic designer, and my schedule has never been normal. I work freelance and take jobs with tight deadlines. That means I can be fully awake at 3 a.m., staring at a screen, while the rest of the world is asleep. Some nights I work until 4 or 5 in the morning. Then I crash and sleep until noon or later. For the first few weeks, I told myself the little weird things were because my life had no routine. I told myself I was sleep deprived. I told myself I was adapting. And for about 3 weeks, that explanation held up. Then, one night, after a long work session, I went into the bathroom to splash water on my face. I turned on the light and stared at the sink for a second, trying to wake myself up. I reached for my toothbrush, and it wasn't there. That might not sound like much, but it hit me hard. There's something intimate about the objects you use every day without thinking. Your toothbrush isn't something you misplace the way you misplace a pen. It has a home. It's always in the same spot. It's part of your routine. I looked around the sink. I checked the cup. I checked the little shelf. I opened the drawer. Nothing. It was a small bathroom, not the kind where things can disappear into corners. I checked the shower ledge and the floor. I even checked the trash, because my brain was trying to invent a reason that made sense. Maybe I threw it away by accident. Maybe I grabbed it and set it down somewhere stupid. After a few minutes, I opened the medicine cabinet. My toothbrush was inside. The cabinet door was closed when I walked in. I know it was. And even if it had been open, I didn't have any reason to put my toothbrush in there. It wasn't even standing upright, like something placed carefully. It was tucked in, like it had been hidden. My stomach dropped, slow and heavy. My heart didn't race at first. It was worse than that. It did that thick, sinking thud, like my body was trying to brace for something my mind hadn't accepted yet. I stared at it, and I tried to build a logical story that explained it. I stood there like a lawyer arguing with myself. Maybe I did it without thinking. Maybe I was half asleep. Maybe I'm sleepwalking. But I've never sleepwalked in my life. Not once. No childhood stories, no roommates telling me I wandered at night. Nothing. The air in the bathroom suddenly felt too thin, like the room had shrunk. I grabbed the toothbrush, like it was contaminated. I ran it under scalding hot water until my fingers hurt. I washed it like you could wash away the feeling crawling up my spine. Then, I told myself to forget it. That was my first mistake, because once that moment happened, every tiny detail after it became sharp. Nothing felt neutral anymore. My mind started tracking everything. And when you start tracking everything, you realize how much your life is built on trust. You trust that your home stays the same when you leave the room. You trust that you're the only person making choices inside your space. After the toothbrush, the apartment started changing in ways that felt personal. A couch cushion would be flipped upside down. A book on my desk would be turned backward, the spine facing the wall like someone had deliberately reversed it. A kitchen towel would be folded differently than how I fold it. At first, I kept arguing with myself. I kept repeating the same line. Alex, you're tired. You're stressed. You're working too hard. You're forgetting things. But it didn't feel like forgetting. It felt like someone was touching my life lightly, just enough to let me know they could. Then the sound started. Old buildings make noise. Florida heat is brutal. Things expand and contract. Pipes click. Wood groans. Air conditioners kick on and off. I knew all that. What I heard wasn't like the building settling. It had a rhythm to it. Not a steady rhythm like footsteps, but the rhythm of someone trying too hard to be quiet. Late at night, when I was at my desk with headphones on, I would hear a soft dragging sound out in the hallway. It was faint, like cloth sliding across hardwood, like a sleeve pulled along the floor. It would stop the second I tried to focus on it, and then start again once I looked back at my screen. Sometimes I would feel the air pressure change in the room. That quick shift, like a door opened and closed behind you. It would happen fast, like someone had moved through the space at speed. Every time I turned around, there was nothing. One night, I decided I needed proof, because the uncertainty was driving me insane. If I had proof, then at least I could stop fighting my own brain. So I set my phone on my desk and let it record audio while I left to pick up food. I was gone about an hour. When I came back, nothing looked different. No mess, no broken locks, no open windows. The apartment smelled the same as always. Old carpet, a little mildew, the constant Florida damp that no air conditioner can ever fully defeat. I sat down at my desk and played the recording. For almost 50 minutes, it was just the ceiling fan. A steady hum, a little static from the phone mic. Nothing else. Then, at the 51st minute, I heard it. A sigh, deep, clear, close to the phone. Not muffled, not distant, like someone leaned in and breathed out next to it. My skin went cold. The sigh wasn't mine. It didn't match my breathing. It wasn't an audio glitch. It had that human weight to it, the sound a person makes when they're tired of waiting. In my head, I saw it immediately, even though I didn't want to. Someone in my apartment, sitting in my chair. Someone listening to the fan, and the quiet waiting for me to leave, breathing in my space like they belonged there. After that, things escalated in a way that made it hard to keep pretending it was in my imagination. Stuff started disappearing. A pair of socks I liked, just gone. Snacks from the fridge, missing. Small items from my desk drawer. Old printed photos from an album I rarely touched. If someone had broken in, I would have expected bigger things to go missing. A laptop, a camera, anything valuable. But nothing like that was taken. It was random and personal, like someone wasn't stealing to make money. Someone was stealing to take pieces of my life. There was no sign of forced entry, no broken windows, no damaged locks, no muddy prints. It started to feel like the apartment itself was swallowing my things. Like the walls were learning my habits and taking what they wanted when I wasn't looking. I tried to tell myself it could still be explained. Maybe maintenance was coming in, maybe the landlord had a key and was letting someone inside. But why steal socks and snacks? Why touch my toothbrush? Ghosts don't eat your food. Ghosts don't sigh next to your phone. My mind kept circling one thought and refusing to land on it. Because once you land on it, the world changes. Someone was living in my building. Not next door, not down the hall. In the spaces I couldn't see. In the blind spots of the apartment. The places that existed but weren't meant for living. And they were watching me. Paranoia is a trap. It's a cage you build with your own hands, one anxious thought at a time. But what I felt wasn't just paranoia. The cage was real. It had drywall and vents and narrow spaces behind insulation. It had a ceiling and a floor. After the sigh recording, I stopped sleeping normally. I would doze for 10 minutes and jerk awake, heart pounding, convinced I heard something. I started sleeping with my back against the wall, facing the room like that could protect me. I would stare into dark corners until my eyes burned. Florida humidity makes everything sticky, but some nights the apartment felt cold in a way that didn't make sense. A thin, creeping chill, like air moving where it shouldn't. Like something was breathing through the walls. During the day, I started noticing details I had never cared about. The complex was older than I first realized. The walls were thicker than modern apartments. The ceilings had those slight dips that suggested hidden spaces, places built for insulation. Maybe old repairs. I started thinking about the way older buildings are constructed. Double layers, voids between units, little channels for wiring and ductwork. If there was a narrow space between walls, could someone fit? Could someone crawl? The thought made me feel sick, but it also made something click into place. It explained the missing items, the soft dragging noises, the air pressure shifts. So the next afternoon, I started checking everything like I was inspecting a crime scene. I looked at the vents first. Most of them were dusty, the way vents get when they haven't been touched in years. But one vent in the kitchen ceiling looked different. The dust around it was disturbed, like hands had brushed it away, and the screws were too clean, shiny metal catching the light. I pulled a chair under it and climbed up. My hands were sweating so badly I had to wipe them on my shirt. I turned on my phone flashlight and aimed it into the gaps. I didn't see a face, but I smelled something. Old sweat, rotting food, damp fabric, that sour, trapped smell that comes from a place that doesn't get sunlight. It was the smell of someone living in a space not meant for living. I got down from the chair shaking. I stood there for a long minute, trying to decide what to do next. Part of me wanted to call the police right then. Another part of me knew how it would sound. "Hi, I think someone is living in my vent." They would ask if I had proof. They would ask if I was on something. They would ask if I was stressed. I needed to know, not just suspect. I remembered a trick from online stories, from those threads people laugh at until the day they stop being funny. You set up something small that would only move if someone else touched it. So I set a thin hair across the closet door, in a way that would break if the door opened. I placed a small cracker right near the edge of the kitchen vent, where it would be hard to miss. Then I did something I still can't believe I did. I pretended to leave. I picked up my keys, opened the door, and stepped out. I let the lock click. I even walked down the hallway a few steps, making my footsteps sound real. Then I came back quietly and slipped inside again, moving like I was the intruder. I hid in the small pantry off the kitchen. It was cramped, filled with canned food and cleaning supplies. I pulled the door almost shut, leaving a crack no wider than a few millimeters. Inside that tiny dark space, my breathing sounded too loud. Every swallow felt like thunder. I had my phone in my hand, ready to call 911, but my fingers were shaky and sweaty. Minutes passed, slow and thick. An hour, then 2. The apartment sat in perfect stillness, the kind of stillness that makes your own body noises feel like they don't belong. I could hear the tick of my wristwatch, like it was right next to my ear. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator. I could hear a car pass outside and fade away. And then I heard something else. It wasn't supernatural. It wasn't a ghost moan or a demon growl. It was metal hinges, moving very slowly. I forced myself to look through the crack in the pantry door. At first, I didn't see anything. Then my eyes adjusted, and I saw the kitchen ceiling. The vent was shifting, not falling, not popping loose, sliding down in a careful, controlled way, as if someone was lowering it with patience. The silence was what made it horrifying. Whoever was doing it knew how to move without sound. Then a hand appeared, a real human hand, not transparent, not misty, not imaginary. The skin was pale, almost colorless, stretched tight so the blue veins showed. The nails were too long and dark with grime. The hand gripped the edge of the vent, and then a body began to come through. The way he moved didn't look normal. It looked practiced. Like he had done it so many times, his joints had learned how to fold in unnatural angles. His shoulders squeezed through, then his ribs, then the rest of him. He wasn't big. He was thin in a way that made him look sharpened, like a person whittled down by hunger and heat and time. He dropped from the ceiling with barely a sound, landing on the floor softly, almost like a cat. For a second, he just stood there, listening. My whole body locked up. I didn't even realize I had stopped breathing until my lungs started to burn. The man moved through my kitchen like he owned it. He walked to the fridge, opened it, and stared inside like he was browsing his own food. He grabbed the milk and drank straight from the carton, eyes flicking around the room between swallows. Then he went to the living room. I watched him from the pantry, crack, my vision tight and shaky like I was looking through a scope. He sat on my couch, and then he did something that turned my stomach so hard I thought I might throw up, right there in the pantry. He grabbed one of the pillows and pressed his face into it, inhaling deeply. Not once, not casually. He breathed it in like it mattered, like he was trying to take something from it. Then he reached for my photo album on the coffee table. He flipped through it slowly, smiling. His teeth were yellow and uneven, and some looked like they were rotting. His lips pulled back in a grin that didn't match anything human and friendly. It was a grin that said he knew me, a grin that said he had been studying me. As he leaned forward, I saw his clothes more clearly, and my stomach dropped again. He was wearing one of my old shirts, the one I had been searching for 2 weeks earlier, the one I assumed I had lost in a move or left at a laundromat. It wasn't just that someone was in my apartment. It was that someone had been in my apartment enough to take my clothes, enough to feel comfortable, enough to treat my home like it was shared space. He wasn't haunting me. He was living alongside me. Some people call them froggers, people who hide in attics, crawl spaces, basements, anywhere they can fit. People who wait until you leave, then come down to eat your food, use your shower, touch your things, learn your routines. People who become part of your home without your permission. Watching him sit on my couch, flipping through my life like it was entertainment, I felt something worse than fear. I felt violated, like my skin didn't fit right anymore. And then, as if the universe wanted to punish me for hiding, my phone buzzed in my hand. Not a call, not a long ringtone, just a loud email notification sound that felt like a gunshot in the quiet pantry. The man froze. His head snapped toward the kitchen. For one awful second, he didn't move at all. He just listened, eyes wide, like an animal that hears a branch crack. Then he turned slowly until he was staring straight at the pantry door. Not at the kitchen in general, at the pantry, at the crack, at me. Time didn't speed up like in action movies. It slowed down, stretched thin, until I felt like I could see every tiny movement. The way his shoulders rose as he breathed, the way his fingers flexed, like he was deciding whether to run or attack. He didn't run. He started walking toward me. Not fast. Slow, hunched, with a strange, careful gait, like he was trying to keep his weight balanced. The way he moved reminded me of a spider crossing a wall. Steady, silent, patient. He tilted his head to one side, then the other, like he was listening to the air. When he got close, I could smell him even through the pantry door crack. It hit me like opening a trash bag in summer. Sour sweat, mold, something rotten and stale. The smell of a body that hadn't been properly washed in a long time, mixed with the dampness of hidden spaces. He reached out and put his hand on the pantry door. He pushed it gently, like he knew exactly how much pressure it would take to make it open without a sound. The crack widened, and our eyes met. There was no surprise in his expression, not real surprise. It was like he had always known this might happen, like this was just another possible version of the day. What I saw in his eyes wasn't anger, it was emptiness, a hollow, dead calm that made my blood feel cold. His voice, when he spoke, was dry and rough, like he hadn't used it much, like his throat wasn't used to making words. "You ruined the game," he whispered. "We could have stayed together much longer." That sentence didn't make sense in a normal way, but it made sense in the worst way. He didn't see himself as a burglar. He didn't see himself as a stranger. He saw this as a shared secret, a game, a relationship. My body moved before my brain did. Adrenaline hit me like electricity. I slammed the pantry door outward with all my strength. It caught him in the face. I felt it connect, felt the impact travel through the door into my arms. He stumbled back, and I burst out of the pantry like I was breaking out of a coffin. I ran into the kitchen, eyes scanning for something, anything. My hands grabbed a long bread knife off the counter. It wasn't a weapon I trusted, but it was sharp and it was in my hand. I turned and saw him already recovering, faster than I expected. He didn't scream. He didn't clutch his face like a normal person would. He straightened up, like pain was only a suggestion. In his hand was a screwdriver. My screwdriver. The one missing from my toolbox for weeks. The one I assumed had fallen behind a drawer. He held it loosely, but confidently, like he understood exactly what it could do to a human body. Then he started to chuckle. It wasn't a laugh you hear at a joke. It was a scraping sound, like cardboard rubbing against cardboard, like a throat that had forgotten how to laugh and was forcing the motion anyway. "I know where you sleep," he said, taking a step closer. "I know how you breathe when you dream. I'm part of your walls now." Every hair on my arms lifted. I backed toward the front door, trying to keep the knife between us. I didn't want to use it. I didn't even know if I could. But I knew he could use the screwdriver. I knew he would. My hand reached behind me for the lock. I didn't make it. He moved quicker, and suddenly he was between me and the door. His thin body blocked the exit like a curtain dropping. Then he did something that made me understand, in a flash, that I wasn't dealing with a normal criminal. He began slamming his forehead into the wooden door. Hard. Once, twice. Over and over, like he was trying to break through it with his skull. "My house," he said between hits. "My house. My house." Blood started running down his face, dark against his pale skin. It dripped onto the floor. He didn't slow down. He didn't seem to feel it. Or maybe he felt it and didn't care. My mouth went dry. My brain kept searching for a safe option and finding none. If I tried to stab him, what if it didn't stop him? If I tried to run past him, what if he grabbed me? If I screamed for help, would anyone hear me? Would anyone even come? In that moment, I remembered something I'd heard once. Something simple. When you need people to react fast, don't scream help. People hesitate. People assume someone else will handle it. But if you scream fire, people move. So I screamed it, as loud as I could. Fire. The word tore out of my throat, so hard it hurt. I screamed it again, and my voice cracked. At the same time, I reached for the stove. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely do what I was trying to do. But I grabbed a kitchen towel and shoved it toward the flame. It caught, quickly, the fabric curling black at the edges. I threw it at him. It wasn't a perfect throw. It didn't land on his body the way you see in movies, but the sight of the fire did something immediate to him. He recoiled sharply, like his brain had one clear instinct left. Avoid flames. That was all I needed. 1 second. A single slice of time. I lunged for the door, turned the lock, yanked it open, and ran into the hallway so fast I nearly fell. I didn't look back. I didn't stop to grab my wallet. I didn't stop to grab my laptop. I didn't stop to think about anything except getting away from that apartment. I ran down the hall, out into the humid night air that felt like a wet blanket, and kept running. I ended up at a police station. I don't even remember the drive there clearly, only the feeling of my hands gripping the steering wheel like I was trying to crush it, and my eyes flicking to the rearview mirror every few seconds, expecting to see him in the back seat. When the police came back with me, the apartment looked normal. Of course it did. The front door was fine. The living room was quiet. The kitchen was quiet. The vent in the ceiling was closed again, sitting flush, like it had never moved. The cracker I placed near it was gone, but that could have been explained away as me forgetting where I put it. One of the officers gave me that look people give when they think you're exhausted or unstable. He didn't say it outright, but I could feel him thinking it. Overworked, stressed, imagining things. But then they searched properly. They checked the vents. They brought in someone from building maintenance. They opened panels and looked into the crawl spaces between the walls and ceiling. It took time. It took effort. It took the kind of searching that makes people sweat and curse and wish the call had been something simpler. And then, one of them found it. The nest. There was a narrow space directly above my bedroom, a void between layers of structure that I hadn't even known existed. It wasn't designed for a person, but someone had made it into a home. My missing clothes were up there, folded and stacked like laundry. Food wrappers and scraps were stuffed into corners. The smell was so bad, one officer gagged and had to climb back out for air. And then they found the photos. Pictures of me, not random photos from social media, not old prints I had misplaced. These were close-up shots taken inside my apartment. Me at my desk, me asleep on the couch, me in the kitchen. Photos taken from angles that suggested someone was above me, looking down. They found my old phone, too. The one I thought I had lost months earlier. Worse than the photos were the tiny holes drilled into my bedroom ceiling. Small, clean holes placed directly over my bed. He had been watching me sleep from a distance of maybe a foot, 12 inches. Close enough that if he had reached down, he could have touched my face. The officers shined a flashlight up through those holes, and the beam looked like thin needles of light piercing the space above. I stood there, staring at them, imagining an eye on the other side, unblinking. They also found a notebook. It wasn't a diary in a normal sense. It was a record, a list, when I showered, when I ate, when I left for groceries, when I came back, what I watched on TV, and there were lines that made my stomach twist, because they were things I had never said out loud to anyone. Notes about nightmares I'd muttered through sleep. Notes about the way I breathed when I was dreaming, exactly like he had said. The police searched for him, but they didn't catch him that night. He was gone, vanished back into the building's hidden spaces. They suspected he escaped through the central AC system, moving through ducts and gaps like he'd been doing for who knows how long. Maybe he had been living there for months before I ever moved in. Maybe he had been hidden in the complex for years, shifting from unit to unit, learning the routines of whoever lived below him. Maybe he was so familiar with the building that he could disappear into it, like it was his own body. I moved out of Florida the next day, not a week later, not after thinking about it, the next day. I didn't pack carefully. I didn't try to be neat. I threw what I could into boxes, left a lot behind, and got out. I didn't argue with myself about money or leases or deposits. None of that mattered. All I could think about was the holes above my bed. I don't live in an apartment anymore. I live in a small farmhouse in the middle of the country, where the walls are solid and thick, and there are no drop ceilings. No wide vents, no old crawl spaces that connect my bedroom to hidden corridors. I also don't work the way I used to. I don't stay up until 5 a.m., staring at a screen. I don't disappear into deadlines so hard that I lose track of my surroundings. I keep lights on. I lock things twice. I installed cameras. I check my closets like it's a habit. But even now, when the house gets quiet at night, I catch myself staring at the ceiling. When I hear wood shift from temperature changes, my body tenses before my mind can calm it down. When the air conditioner clicks on, I listen like it's trying to say something. Because I learned something in that Tampa apartment that I can't unlearn. It's not ghosts you should be afraid of. Not really. You should be afraid of the person who can live right next to you without you knowing. The person who learns the shape of your routine, the way a thief learns the shape of a lock. The person who hides in the dead spaces of your home, patient and quiet, waiting for you to leave, waiting for you to sleep. And if you're reading this late at night, in a room that feels too quiet, pay attention to the sounds you normally ignore. The soft clicks, the tiny shifts, the places your eyes don't naturally go. Because you don't always feel a presence when it's there. Sometimes you only notice it when something small is moved, just enough to make you question yourself. Sometimes you only notice it when you hear a sigh beside your phone in an empty room. And sometimes, by the time you finally understand, the person above you has already been watching for a long time, waiting patiently until you close your eyes. Story 7. Bill's voice came through my phone like a bad radio signal. Got a situation over here. A real big one. I cut a slab off his belly. Tasted great, but now my stomach's in knots. Hurry up. I'm worried someone will see me. Folks been out fishing. Hunting too. I closed my eyes and pinched the bridge of my nose so hard it hurt. God damn it, Bill. If there was one voice I didn't want to hear today, it was his. Not didn't want to. Either. Couldn't. Not today of all days. Behind me, my backyard was full of bright balloons and cheap streamers and the sharp, excited sound of little kids screaming for no reason at all. Evelyn's 6th birthday party had just started. A princess theme. Tiny plastic tiaras. Wands that lit up and clicked. Pink paper plates. Everything my daughter had asked for. And I was about to leave it. Evelyn ran straight into me like a small happy missile and wrapped her arms around my waist. Her cheeks were sticky with frosting. Daddy, I got a new princess book, and you can read it to me tonight. She jumped and tapped her wand against my forehead like she was knighting me. I forced a smile that felt wrong on my face. Sweetheart, Dad has to work tonight. You'll have Mommy read it to you. Her smile dropped fast. Kids don't hide disappointment. They don't know how. She stared at me like I'd broken a promise I hadn't even made yet. My wife, Mary, stepped closer, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Her face was already tired, like she'd been carrying the whole party on her back since sunrise. You have to work? She asked slowly, like she was testing whether I was lying. Yeah, I said. A marketing guy dropped out. It's an emergency. We're going into all hands mode. It came out smooth. Too smooth. I'd used some version of that line so many times, it didn't even feel like lying anymore. It felt like reading a script. Mary blinked at me, then gave me a look that wasn't anger exactly. It was something flatter, like she'd reached the point where getting mad took too much energy. "Have fun," she said. That was what she always said now. 2 words that meant, do whatever you're going to do. I'm not fighting you about it anymore. She took Evelyn's hand and led her back to the backyard, where a dozen little girls ran in circles, waving wands and shrieking like they were casting spells. Someone turned on music. Someone popped a balloon. A kid cried. Another kid laughed. The party rolled on without me, like I didn't matter. When Mary heard the words, "work emergency," she turned into a different person. A quiet person. A person with a mission to disappear into the house and drain the liquor cabinet until she didn't have to feel anything. I'd trained her to do that. Not on purpose, but the result was the same. I walked to my truck, got in, and drove. Every time I drove out to Bill's place, I passed the same billboard. It sat on the side of the road like a half-forgotten warning. A faded photo of a smiling teenage boy. 14 maybe. Baby face. Hair too neat, the kind of school picture parents used for Christmas cards. Under it, in big letters, "Have you seen me?" The Oklahoma sun and storms had chewed the sign up over the years. Parts of the words were gone now, and the boy's smile was cracked and bleached, like his teeth had been sandblasted away. But I'd seen it when it was new. I knew exactly what it said, and I had seen the boy. I was the last person to ever see him alive. The back roads to Bill's shack went on forever. 2-lane stretches of nothing, then narrower dirt roads, then ruts and tall grass and twisted trees that leaned like they were tired of standing. If your head was empty, it would feel peaceful. If your head was like mine, it was torture. I didn't daydream. I planned, and under the planning was something worse than worry. The sense that every plan I made was just a flimsy cover over something rotten. Nothing out here grew straight. Even the fence posts looked tired. There was a dead, crooked tree at the end of one dirt road, bent like a hooked finger. Every time I saw it, I got the same taste in my mouth. Metallic and sharp, like pennies. I turned left at the tree. Bill stood on his porch, tapping his foot like a kid waiting for the school bus. He had something dark on his chin. At first I thought it was grease. Then I realized it was blood. I parked hard, got out, and yelled, "Hey, idiot, where is it?" 30 yards back, he said. His voice was casual, like he was pointing out a fallen branch. I walked around behind the shack, and there he was. A body laid out on the dirt, like somebody had dropped a bag of laundry, and it had exploded into limbs. Pale skin, bald head, huge stomach, and a chunk missing from that stomach, like someone had taken a brick out of a wall. My throat tightened. "The table saw's still in there, right?" I asked, already knowing the answer would be something that made my day worse. Bill grinned, a dumb, toothy grin that never matched the situation. "Sold it," he said. For a second, I just stared at him. My brain tried to reject the words. Sold it, like it was an extra lawn chair, like it wasn't the one tool that made this manageable. Bill pulled a crumpled wad of cash out of his apron pocket and pressed it into my hand. 3 $50 bills. $150, like that was some kind of prize. Payment. Like I was a contractor and not his brother who'd been cleaning up his messes for years. I looked down at the money. Then I pocketed one of the 50s because I'm not a saint and because the habit of accepting his money had become part of the ritual. Then I crumpled the other 2 bills back up and flicked them at his face. They bounced off his cheek and dropped into the dirt. He didn't even flinch. "What was that for?" he asked, honestly confused. "Do we at least have the bone saws?" I said, pushing past him toward the shack. Bill nodded, like I'd asked if he remembered to buy milk. "Gloves? A tarp?" I asked. He shook his head. Something in me went cold and tired. We were going to cut a huge body into pieces with bone saws, barehanded, on a dirty wooden floor. That meant blood under our nails, skin under our nails, hair, maybe, maggots, if we were lucky enough not to vomit first. I stepped outside and called Mary. I needed to tell her I wouldn't be home tonight. I'd already missed most of the party. I was going to miss the rest of it, too. The service out here was bad. I could hear her breathing and the faint sound of music, but her words came in and out like she was underwater. Evelyn can't sleep without a bed. Time story, but I can't do it." A hiccup. A long, wet inhale. Then again, "I can't do it. I can't do it." She was broken. There's a difference, and it's worse. I listened until the guilt got so heavy I couldn't hold it. Then I ended the call, because there was nothing I could say that would fix anything. Behind me, Bill shouted, "Come on. This body won't move itself." He sounded excited, like this was work he enjoyed. The body was fresh. Sweat slicked the skin. That told me it hadn't been dead long, and it told me moving it would be a nightmare. We stood there and argued for a second like idiots, then did what we always did to settle the ugly stuff. Rock, paper, scissors. I lost. Of course I did. I grabbed the shoulders. They were wet and soft and heavy in a way I can't describe without you feeling it. Not just weight, a kind of warm, living heaviness that makes your brain whisper, "This should not be here." As we dragged him, his skin stuck to my fingers like glue. Mosquitoes chewed through my socks. Gnats flew into my eyes, and I blinked hard until my eyelids hurt. The air smelled like wet dirt and old wood, and something sour underneath. By the time we got him into the shack, my legs were dotted with bites, and my hands felt like they'd been dipped in oil. I blinked and saw smears of tiny crushed gnats on my lashes. Bill started undressing, like we were about to go swimming. He stripped down to his briefs and walked to the dresser by the stove, where he kept tools like other people kept silverware. He pulled out 2 bone saws and ran them against each other, teeth on teeth. The sound scraped my nerves, like a rattlesnake that couldn't decide whether to strike. "You ready?" he asked, laughing quietly. "I'm missing Evelyn's birthday for this," I said. I wiped sweat off my forehead and tried not to imagine my daughter blowing out candles without me. Bill tilted his head. "Should I get her a card?" I stared at him. "No." He shrugged, like that settled it. "Okay, get undressed. We gotta start." I pulled my shirt off and threw my clothes into a corner. He tossed me a saw. I hated the brutality of it, hated myself for being able to do it. But there was something weirdly satisfying about sawing through flesh. The teeth biting, the pressure, the slow giving way. The awful relief when a limb finally separated and hit the floor with a heavy thump. They were already dead, my brain said, so who cares? I started with the shoes, untied them, tugged one off, and the smell that came out made my eyes water. It wasn't regular foot stink. It wasn't sweat. It was an infection. Rot, like something had been dying inside him long before Bill found him. He hadn't been dead long enough for the full corpse smell to set in. His blood was just starting to settle. But that foot was wrong. I pulled the sock. Something dropped out and hit the wooden floor in a scatter of tiny taps, like rice thrown on a tin roof. Maggots. Dozens of them, pale and fat, and moving like one living spill. The skin on his foot was chewed raw, like it had been dissolving. Acid rose in my throat. I swallowed it down hard. "How long ago did you kill him?" I asked, keeping my voice calm because panic didn't help. Bill stared at the maggots like they'd personally offended him. "An hour ago. Maybe. How'd those get there so fast?" I didn't answer. I just grabbed his other foot and pressed my wrist against the sock. It moved. The whole sock wriggled. Bill took a step back. "Let's cut his feet off and deal with the maggots later." I looked at the man's belly, at the missing chunk. "Wait, you said you cut a piece off him?" "From his stomach." Bill nodded, licking his lips like he could still taste it. "Yeah." Bill looked down at the body, then made a long, thoughtful hum. "It's not there." "I know it's not there," I said, my voice sharpened. "Where is it?" I put the saw to the man's torso, ready to start, ready to get this over with. The teeth touched skin, and the fat man sucked in a quick, sharp breath. I jumped back so fast I nearly fell. My heel crushed a few maggots behind me, and they popped like tiny blisters. Bill froze, his mouth half open. From the body, a whisper scraped out, dry as dead leaves. "Feast on me." My heart slammed so hard, I felt it in my throat. Bill and I looked at each other, and we spoke at the same time, the same words. "Was that you?" We both knew it wasn't. Bill nudged the stomach with his foot. The fat jiggled. The body stayed still. I crouched and put 2 fingers to the man's neck. Nothing. No pulse. At least, I couldn't feel one. My own heartbeat was roaring through my hands and ears. "Where did you get him?" I asked. Bill poked the man's cheek with 1 finger, like he expected it to bounce. "Found him out there." Further back, he was kneeling in the dirt, like he was praying or something. He chuckled, then his laugh faltered, mumbling like a lunatic. I tried talking to him. He didn't say anything, so I choked him. He smelled awful. Weird thing was, he didn't even try to fight me off. A hiccup came from the body. Then another inhale. The fat man sat up. His eyes opened, dull and wet, and then he dropped back down like someone cut his strings, hitting the floor with a wet slap. His mouth opened and closed. He swallowed. "Keep eating." He rasped like his tongue was too big for his mouth. Bill and I ran. No plan. No words. Just raw fear. Bill made a high yelp like he'd jumped into ice water. I stumbled out onto the porch and sat hard on the steps, trying to breathe. My vision narrowed at the edges, dark and tight, like a tunnel was closing in. To my right, Bill took a few fast breaths. Then he made a sound low in his throat, like anger was swallowing the fear. He charged back inside. The door slammed open. There was a yell. Then a deep crack, another crack. Then Bill started laughing. Not nervous laughter, real laughter, like this was fun. And then came a sound that made my skin crawl. A wet, heavy crunch, over and over. Crack, crunch, crack. In between those impacts was another sound. Thin and raw, like metal being twisted. A groan that turned into a scream. After a handful of hits, I couldn't tell which noise belonged to who. It was just 2 animals fighting in the dark. Then the cracking stopped. Bill's laughter slowed, then faded. The only sound left was a sputtering squeal, high and strained, like a tea kettle left on too long. I forced myself to stand and go inside. The floor was splattered dark, sticky, shining in the light from the stove. Bill's feet were painted with gore up to his ankles. The fat man's head was smashed in, not just broken, gone. A crater where a face should have been, filled with blood that bubbled as the squeal continued, like something inside it was breathing. Bill stood over him, chest rising and falling. He let out a long breath. "He's dead," Bill said, like he was trying to convince himself. "For real now." I nodded, though I didn't believe it. "Yeah? Maybe." Bill kicked the head. The crater shifted. Blood spilled onto the floorboards. The squeal got louder for a second, angry and alive. For the next 20 minutes we worked like machines. Cut, saw, separate, stack. The squeal faded eventually, and when it did, my headache eased a little, like my body had been bracing against a sound it couldn't understand. We cut off limbs, broke down joints, pushed pieces into bags. We didn't talk about the voice. We didn't talk about the way the blood had bubbled. It was easier to pretend it had all been panic. Halfway through the left leg, I couldn't help myself. We'd be dumping him in the lake by now if you hadn't sold the table saw for beer money. Bill snorted. "Where else am I supposed to get cash? Rob a bank?" If Bill robbed a bank, I honestly didn't think it would even crack his top 10 worst things. We finished sawing through a thick section of hip when we heard a new sound. Squelch, squelch. It was steady, rhythmic, like a heartbeat, but wrong, too wet. The wound where the right arm had been was moving. Bill and I leaned in, close enough to smell warm blood and infection. Something pushed out of the torn flesh. A finger, then another. A hand emerged, forcing its way out like something hatching. The body started to shake. Blood splattered out of the ruined head crater and spotted the walls. Another arm pushed out of the other shoulder wound, tearing through meat and tendon like tissue paper. The legs twitched hard, then bent like they were finding shape again. Bill started stomping, desperate, aiming for the head, for the chest, for anywhere that looked like it might stop this. The body kept shaking like it was laughing silently. The squeal returned, louder now, fuller, like it had lungs. The fat man jerked up onto his feet, as if yanked by invisible strings. His arms, broken and half-formed, swung wildly like whips. He released a scream that didn't sound human. It sounded like a brass instrument blown too hard, a trumpet of pain and hunger. Then he ran outside. We heard him crashing through the trees. Branches snapped, leaves ripped. A low groan drifted back, then faded into distance until there was nothing but night. Bill and I stood in the shack, still holding our saws, unable to move. Like if we stayed perfectly still, the world might reset. After about a minute, Bill slapped his own face hard. Once, twice, again, like he was trying to wake himself up. He dropped to his knees and grabbed his hair with both hands. "This one was different," he whispered. "I shouldn't have taken this one." It felt. He didn't fight when I choked him. He pressed his fingers into his eyes and shook his head like a wet dog. Then he stretched out on the floor, breathing fast and shallow. I couldn't stop staring at the door. The fat man could come back any second. Bill got up suddenly and grabbed me by the shoulders. His eyes were glossy, wild. Tears filled them, and his voice went small. "I don't think I killed a person." I'd never seen Bill afraid, not real fear. The only emotions I'd ever seen from him were the ones between happiness and insanity. Then a sound cut through the air. Thunk, Metal on metal. We both froze. I moved to the doorway and looked out. The fat man was back. He was slamming his head into the side of my car like he was trying to dent his way inside. Each hit made the door shudder. Before I could think, I yelled, "Hey!" It stopped and lifted its head. Its face was rebuilding, not with normal skin, with scab. Thick, greenish scab, like infected wounds crusted over and then tried to pretend they were whole. Its eyes had returned, but there were no eyelids, just wide, wet white circles with black dots that locked onto me. When its eyes met mine, it dropped behind the car and made a sound like gurgling and chewing at the same time. Then a pop. My car shifted, sinking on one side. It was biting the tire. I turned and grabbed Bill by the back of the neck. "You found this thing. You deal with it. I didn't sign up for this." He stared down, one hand clutching his stomach, the other covering his mouth. "My stomach," he whispered, like the word itself hurt. "Bill, listen to me," I started, but he gagged. Then came a sound I'll never forget, like wet spaghetti being dumped onto the floor. I turned in time to see Bill stumble out the door, hunched over, moving fast like he was trying to outrun his own body. Where he'd been standing, on the floorboards, was a puddle of maggots. Not a few. A lot. Enough to make a shape, like a shadow made of writhing meat. I ran to the doorway. Bill was already in the yard, lit by the weak moonlight, sprinting straight into the woods like he couldn't feel his legs, like something else was driving him. I waited for a laugh, a scream, anything. Nothing. He vanished into the trees as if the dark swallowed him whole. I stood on the porch and shouted, "Bill, come back." No crickets, no frogs. The normal night sounds were gone, replaced by the sick feeling of nothing at all. I ran to my truck. Even with a damaged tire, I wanted out. I didn't care if I had to drive on the rim. I didn't care if I had to abandon it and walk. I turned onto the dirt road and gunned it. I hadn't gone far, maybe 500 feet, when Bill darted in front of my headlights. I swerved hard to avoid him. The truck slammed into a tree, flipped, and rolled into a ditch. The world turned sideways. The steering wheel punched my head. My breath got shoved out of me in one violent burst. The airbags went off late, useless, smacking me after I'd already been hit. Everything rang, and through that ringing, I heard something else. Door handles being yanked again and again, like an eager child trying to get into a locked car. Panic cleared my head in a second. I fumbled for the keys and hit the lock button over and over, like it did anything in a flipped truck. My finger slipped, and I hit the alarm. The horn blasted into the night. 2 screams answered it. 2 different screams. One was my brother's voice, raw and terrified. The other was something inhuman, too deep and too sharp, like the forest itself was screaming. Then the sounds moved away, fading, swallowed. Silence came back, heavier than before. I decided to run for the main road. It was about 2 miles. I could do it in under 10 minutes if I didn't stop to think. I crawled out of the truck and ran. As I ran, I patted my pockets for my phone. Not there. My sprint dropped into a jog, dread pulling me back like a hand on my collar. I turned and stared at the wreck. My phone was in the truck. My silent upside-down truck. Red taillights lit the dirt and trees behind it like warning lights. In that red glow, a body moved toward me. Running, only one. Arms swinging in perfect rhythm, like it had practiced. I turned forward and ran again. Wind dried blood on my lip and left that metallic penny taste in my mouth. Every breath burned. I glanced back. The runner veered into the trees, keeping pace beside me. I could hear leaves crunching faster than my footsteps, like it didn't have to try. My legs went numb, but I kept going. Ahead, the pale stripe of the main road got closer. Behind me, the crunching grew louder until it wasn't in the leaves anymore. It was on dirt, right next to me. Then, suddenly, it stopped. The silence hit like the end of a drum solo, so abrupt it made my ears feel full, like the air itself was humming. I slowed and turned. The fat man stood in the cold spill of light from the road. His eyes caught it first. They didn't look like human eyes anymore. They shimmered, bright and sharp like distant stars. "What are you doing?" I called out, my voice cracking. It lowered itself to its knees, folded down like a person preparing to pray, head tucked into the space between its legs, arms wrapped around itself. It held that position perfectly still. "Where's my brother?" I yelled. My throat tightened. Tears came hot and fast, mixing with dirt and dried blood on my face. I looked toward the main road, desperate for headlights. A car flew past without slowing. The rush of hot wind hit me, and instinct took over. I turned and ran toward the road, toward anything that meant other people existed. Eventually, a semi-truck came barreling down, and I waved my arms like a madman. It slowed, air brakes hissing, and pulled over. I yanked the passenger door open and nearly fell into the seat. The driver looked me over and whistled. "Jesus, buddy," he said, laughing like he didn't know what else to do. "You need a ride?" "Drive," I said. My voice sounded wrong. "Just drive, don't stop." He hesitated, then nodded. A toothpick rolled in the corner of his mouth. Maybe some cash would help me out. I pulled out the 50 I'd kept. My fingers shook as I handed it to him. He glanced at me again, his grin fading a little. "You're messed up. You need a hospital?" I shook my head. No. I couldn't explain. I didn't even know how to start. We barely spoke after that. I gave him an address near my neighborhood. He drove. The highway lights flashed across the windshield in steady beats that felt like a heartbeat I couldn't escape. When he dropped me off at the entrance of my neighborhood, I got out and stood in the dark watching his taillights disappear like a lifeline snapping. My street was quiet, too quiet. The front door of my house was unlocked. All the lights were on. I stepped inside, and the air hit me. Stale cake, cheap perfume, and something sour I didn't want to name. I checked the time on the microwave. 12:03. My daughter wasn't in bed. For a second, my brain tried to make excuses. Maybe she fell asleep in my room. Maybe. I checked my bedroom. Empty bed. I checked Evelyn's room. Empty. The bathroom. The closet. The living room. The couch. The pantry. Like she might be playing some stupid hide-and-seek game. Nothing. Panic rose so fast I felt dizzy. I called Mary's phone. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Nothing. I called Mary's parents. They answered groggy and angry. And when I asked if Evelyn was there, their anger turned into confusion, and then into something sharp and accusing. "No," her mom snapped. "Why would she be here? Why are you calling at midnight?" I hung up before I started screaming. I stood in my kitchen, trying to breathe, trying to think like a normal person with a normal problem. Call 911. Report missing persons. Do something. Then I saw the dining table. 3 plates were set out. 2 plates were mostly wiped clean, with a thin shine of grease left behind. like someone had eaten quickly and didn't bother with manners. The third plate still had food on it. It looked like pork, pale and torn, edges darkened, like it had been cooked too long. A letter sat next to that plate. My stomach dropped before I even picked it up. The handwriting was sloppy, uneven. Happy birthday. From Uncle Bill. I let the paper fall from my fingers. Behind the house, the backyard motion lights clicked on. I moved to the back door in a rush and shoved it open. The yard looked half cleaned, like someone started taking the party down and then got distracted. Some chairs were folded. Some banners drooped. Paper cups and napkins were scattered like the place had been abandoned in the middle of a celebration. I ran out barefoot onto the grass. "Evelyn?" I shouted. "Mary." My voice tore apart. I kept yelling until my throat burned and the sound turned rough and useless. I dropped to my knees. The moment my knees hit the ground, I felt movement, wriggling. I pushed myself up and looked down. Maggots, crushed under me, smeared into the grass like little popped blisters. I followed the trail, a thin line of them leading away from the yard and into the darker side of the house, where the motion lights didn't reach. "Bill?" I whispered, though I didn't know why I said his name, like he could fix anything. No response. "Evelyn?" I tried again, softer. I stood there, frozen, deciding whether to follow the trail into the dark. The backyard lights shut off. For a second, I was blind, surrounded by night. In that darkness, smells came alive. Liquor, strong, sweet, familiar, Mary's favorite. And beneath it, another smell that made my stomach twist. Infection. Rot. That same sick-foot smell from the shack. The lights whirred back on. 3 figures knelt in the grass near the side of the house, positioned like they'd been arranged, heads tucked down tight against their legs, arms wrapped around themselves, the same kneeling shape I'd seen on the road. A V shape. My daughter in front. Evelyn was still in her princess costume. Pink nylon wings stuck to her hair. Her wand was still clenched in her fist like she'd refused to let it go. I ran to her and dropped beside her, pulling her into my arms. "I'm sorry," I choked out. "I'm so sorry I wasn't here. I'm sorry." Her body was stiff, cold, not like sleep, like winter. I put my hand over hers. "I can still read your book," I whispered, like words could rewind time. "I can still." Tears poured out of me. They streaked down my face, picking up dried blood and leaving little red marks in her hair as they fell. I tried to lift her. She didn't move. It was like pulling a statue. Evelyn didn't breathe. She didn't speak. Neither did the other 2. Mary, Bill, all 3 of them knelt there in the grass, like they were waiting for a command, like they were holding themselves in place so they wouldn't fall apart. My brain refused it at first. It tried to argue with reality. It tried to say, this is a prank, this is shock, this is a dream. But the smell of rot said it wasn't a dream. It shouldn't be like this. I didn't even want to go help Bill today. I could have stayed. I could have read the princess book. I could have been here when she needed me. Everything that mattered to me was kneeling in my backyard. I don't know why, but I couldn't shake the thought that they were waiting for me. I looked back through the sliding door at the dining table, at the single plate with meat still on it, and at Bill's crooked birthday message. My stomach tightened, turning in slow circles, because somehow, deep down, I understood what the kneeling meant. I understood what would happen if I didn't empty it.